I think, well, I think we'll get going. If more people pop in, I'll just admit them and they can kind of catch up if that works. So good evening, everyone. My name is Allyse Freeman, and I am the curator here at the Minnesota Discovery Center. And so thank you guys for joining us for our first speaker series associated with our exhibit, We Are Water, Minnesota, from the Minnesota Humanities Center. Bear with us as this is kind of our first Zoom presentation. I think it should be good, but just please be patient with us if something happens. So before I get into a couple of other things, I would like to take just a brief moment to say that the land that Minnesota Discovery Center is on is the ancestral home to both the Dakota and the Ojibwe people. So again, just let's keep this in mind as we are just living our life and navigating our landscapes. So Zoom rules. If everyone could just, video doesn't matter. You can share your video. You don't have to completely what's ever comfortable for you. We would ask that you either stay muted or, just be quiet as Marne is going to present. We will have time for questions at the very end. And so you guys can either put your question in chat, which there's the little chat window at the bottom. So you can type it out, or if you just want to say, I have a question, Becca and I will kind of be working with those throughout the presentation, and then we can call on you later, just so we don't have, a bunch of people all kind of jumping in at once to ask their questions. So let's see, I got that out of the way. So really quickly, the next speaker event will be on June 17th, which is also a Thursday, same time, same setup. We'll have a registration link for that, and that will be featuring our exhibit researcher and labor historian, Gary Kaunanen, and he'll be talking about the fur trade era, which obviously relied heavily upon the connected waterways, and its association with the early labor movement on the Iron Ranger in our region. And so, yeah, same time, same setup, all that good stuff. And now I'll turn it over to my current partner in crime for this exhibit, Becca, real quick. Take it away, Becca.
Thanks. Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, so thank you for coming, everybody. We're so happy to have so many people that are interested. We Are Water Minnesota is a program that I'm going to explain. It's about exploring the relationship Minnesotans have with water, learn what both science and the humanities can teach us about our water resource. There's a traveling exhibit that examines water issues statewide, and right now it's at the Minnesota Discovery Center through July 11th. And it examines water issues statewide and in our local communities through personal stories, histories, scientific information. And its goal is to strengthen Minnesota's relationships with water, expose visitors to new perspectives, and increase participation in water stewardship activities. And this has been a long time coming because the exhibit was supposed to open last year during the pandemic. So we're very happy that we can have the exhibit at the Discovery Center as well as have these events that are related, like the speaker series. So in addition to today with Marne and the 1854 Treaty Authority, we'll also have the fur trade era, as Allyse just mentioned. On July 1st, we'll have a talk on Mii'iw walks from Sharon Day, who's a Boys Fort band member. And also on July 8th, we'll have a talk about invasive species in our communities from Natalia Walker, who is a program coordinator in the North St. Louis Soil and Water Conservation, which is also where I work. And then also on June 10th, so this is an in-person event. I understand everyone on the Zoom might not be able to attend, but there will be a play performed that was written by Sharon Day of the Indigenous Peoples Task Force, and who's also speaking on July 1st, that weaves together stories of Indigenous struggles to protect water. Also going on right now is a virtual BioBlitz that's at select locations across the Iron Range that are near water. So like in Hibbing, there's Cary Park, there's the Discovery Center, of course, and Silver Lake in Virginia, Ely Lake in kind of Eveleth Vale Township, Lake Vermilion, St. Andrew on Mine State Park, which I saw a few people from, and a couple other places across the range. So that's there's going to be a Zoom how to use iNaturalist, which is how we'll be recording cool plants and animal observations that people make in a way to like connect people to our water resources up in this area. We'll also be having some adventure series, a field trip to the Sax-Zim Bog, and also a paddle on the St. Louis River. We're still working out some of the details there, especially when it comes to what social distancing guidelines we do still need to follow. So if you are specifically interested in those, I haven't opened registration yet. So you can email me, my email's at the bottom, or our website that we're putting kind of all the events together at is wearewaterironrange.com. You can also find a link to that at the Discovery Center's website or the Soil and Water Conservation District's website. So yeah, with that, that's our upcoming events. You'll find at least a mention of all of those on that We Are Water Iron Range site right now. But today we want to welcome Marne from the 1854 Treaty Authority. So I'll hand that over back to Allyse if there's anything more you want to say, or if you want to hand it over to Marne.
I do have, okay, I have one thing. I did forget to mention, we are currently recording this Zoom presentation, and that will be so then we can share it with others who may not have been able to make it tonight. But just full disclosure to everyone on the Zoom call tonight that we are currently recording it.
And thank you to our many sponsors. It's a program run through the Minnesota Humanities Center, funded by the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment. Many Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, Department of Health, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and then the Minnesota Historical Society, as well as many local partners. It's not just the Discovery Center and the Soil and Water Conservation District. We've had contributions from so many organizations, and we're thankful for them. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, so with that, take it away, Marne.
Allyse, did you mention sticking around for prizes?
Briefly, I'll just reiterate. So Becca will be running a prize wheel. So everyone who is currently in the Zoom call right now has a chance to win a Discovery Pass for MDC, or what was it, 2 $25 gift cards, right, Becca, for MDC.
For the Rustic Pig.
For the Rustic Pig, our restaurant. See, it's been a long week. And what was the last thing, Becca?
And then a package of wild rice from the gift shop.
Thank you. Goodness, which is delicious. There we go. So please stick around to see if you won that, and we can then contact you and get that all set up. So now,
thanks for the reminder.
Thank you. Sorry.
And I will mention where we got the idea for that is from Marne. Marne's presentations with the St. Louis County Historical Society, which were really great. They have a YouTube channel with their presentations that were recorded in the past. So I highly recommend people checking those out too.
Well, we got you guys. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. You've done some really good work in prepping for this event. I love it. Bonjour, Marne Indigenous, 1854 Treaty Authority, Nindanaki, Onogaminsinganda, Giguzi Beans, and Dunjaba. Mii'iw. My name is Marne. I am the Cultural Preservation Specialist with the 1854 Treaty Authority. I actually am the division lead for our education and outreach programming. And it's so glad to be able to like do these presentations, even if we can't be in person, but I would love to be in person so I could ask you all sorts of questions and give you freebies. And but we'll take the Zoom anyways. It's nice to be able to at least reach folks out and about. who don't have to travel to get here. So with that, I will start sharing my screen. So I'd like to start with asking just kind of a show of hands, like how many folks are familiar with 1854 the way I can't see you, and I don't think you have audio capabilities, but I'm wondering if you could just type in the chat, like, yes, I know who 1854 is, or I've heard of them. That'd be really helpful for me to know, kind of just gauge the education of the audience. Which I got to get a shout out to Tracy, Janan, and Joseph, my colleagues and friends. Awesome. There's a lot of folks who have heard of us. That's great. A couple who haven't, guess what? For everybody who's here, this presentation is for you. Because anybody who lives here in northeastern Minnesota, this treaty definitely affects our way of life, how we live. So it's important to know a little bit more about it. So for those of you that don't know, 1854 Treaty Authority is an intertribal natural resource management agency. We work for the Boys Fort Band and the Grand Portage Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa in protecting and implementing off-reservation treaty rights harvest. So that's hunting, fishing, gathering wild rice, medicine plants, you name it, access. So you guys are pretty familiar with your landscape. Today, the 1854 ceded territory contains about 5.5 billion acres of land. So it encompasses Cook and Lake County in total, most of St. Louis and Carleton County, and a wee bit of Pine and Aitkin County. It is about 45% federal public lands, with the Superior National Forest and the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. It has a smattering of state parks, 12 to be exact. It's got 3 reservations encompassed as well: Grand Portage, Fond du Lac, and the Vermilion tract of the Boys Fort Reservation System. We also have a Great Lakes shoreline, and that's pretty awesome. A big refrigerator at our door. So when I describe who 1854 is, I like to kind of draw a comparison to other natural resource management agencies. Again, if you can, drop a line in your chat box of other natural resource management agencies that you know about or you're familiar with. DNR, MPCA, DOA, SWCDs, DNR. You got it. Awesome. Totally. So 1854 is a natural resource management agency. Comparatively, Minnesota Natural Resources. Department of Natural Resources is also a natural resource management agency. They work for the people statewide. They work in the land statewide. They do a lot of great things: pollution control, a lot of forestry. One of my favorites is that they maintain trail systems as well as boat launches for the smattering of inland lakes that we have. So we can access some of these wildlands, green spaces, as well as get on the water with our boats and stuff. So thinking a little bit broader, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, perhaps. See somebody else here. Yeah, said thinking broader. I like that you guys are thinking smaller too. SWCDs, you guys do a whole bunch of great work. I can't love it. I appreciate it so much. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they work nationwide, right? So they work for the people of the U.S., but they're tasked with something a little bit different. So their objective is to watch over the plant and animal species that aren't doing so hot, right? So like threatened and endangered species. Whereas 1854 Treaty Authority, we work for the people of the Boys Fort and the Grand Portage Band. And our area that we work within is what we call the ceded territory. So all that portion of northeastern Minnesota on our logo, which stands out as being yellow. And our main objective is to maintain a food source. So our story actually starts thousands and thousands of years ago, when the way of life was determined by the season. It marked what one and what the community should be doing, living off of the land. So about this time, if I were related to summer, we'd be cruising around in our G-Man, in our canoes, using all the waterways as water highways to get to one place from another. Then as the fall sets in, it would be the Marne Kaeske, the wild rising moon, about September time. And then in the 13 months of winter, as I like to say that we have, without any grocery stores to go buy your dinner, you'd have to go catch it. So we'd be heading to the dark house to spear for fish. And then at the end of spring, or end of winter, excuse me, we would all pitch in to work hard and set up sugar camp. The sugaring moon, the boiling down sap moon, in fact. And what I like about this comparison, as well as what I really appreciate about this landscape still, is that there's still a lot of green space that we can continue to do these activities. And these activities aren't just a way of the past. They're very much a part of all the communities that live here, this way of life. I saw earlier on somebody like Jim shared, like, oh, I grew up paddling the boundary waters and whatnot. And it's true, like we can do that stuff because they're there. They're there for us to partake. So back it up here for a second. I want to ask you guys what a treaty is. And since you can't raise your hands and I can't provide you with any treats right now in a classroom setting as we might do, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It's an agreement, right? It's a agreement between two or more parties. And probably our most renowned treaty in American history is the Treaty of Paris, signed in 1783. That treaty did two things. First off, it declared American independence, and secondly, it ended the Revolutionary War. And our government is still signing treaties today with foreign nations. They're very binding covenants, living binding covenants, hard to break. You have to think of it as a marriage. It's with both parties compromising on their own behalves. There's certain things that are built upon that agreement that are really hard to undo, if you will. Just to give you an example of our government, our federal government, still making treaties today. I think the slide is from 2018, but I know that 2019 at least, there were 42 treaties signed between the US and foreign nations, mostly trade related. So the fact that the US approached, not only in the history, not only like these indigenous nations, but they're still approaching other foreign countries with these agreement opportunities, it really recognizes their sovereignty. It recognizes their self-rule, their political designation as a people. So pertaining to our story, 1854, it's the mid-1800s. I'll kind of break down, I'll give you the footnotes of the history here. It is the mid-1800s. United States is interested in bringing this landscape, bringing more lands into taxation, right? They know that there's a lot of good mineral resources here, lumber, awesome. They want to get in there. They want to bring these lands into taxation. My favorite example is that they want to set up cattle farms because we're Americans and we like to eat cheeseburgers. Yes, Janan, you were so right. That's why I do what I do. She wrote in the chat, yes, the US government still fights to recognize some of these treaties to this day. And that's true. That's what I'm going to dive into in this presentation, is that we're still fighting. The fact that folks that live on this land that was brought into American territory through a treaty, if they don't know that, that's kind of sad. It's part of their history, everybody who lives here. So true that. All right, mid-1800s, US is looking at this land thinking, oh man, we got to bring this land into taxation. We want to settle it. They had a lot of expansion needs, right? And they had sent out surveyors to looking to see how valuable it was. But these weren't vacant lands, right? There had been a very robust economy going on for over 150 years that brought not only the native peoples into an economic agreement, but also folks from foreign countries looking to make a dime off of the fur trade. Yeah, many people from different areas came here to assist in that. And based on the American Indian policy era that the US was in, the treaty era, that said that they must approach those folks for holding first land title with an agreement as such in order to carry out this process. So they did. US representatives sat down and were like, hey, Chippewa leaders, we have a compromise for you. If you'd agree to exchange your land or cede your land over, we'll make sure to provide spaces for you and your communities to live forevermore. All right, 54 treaty also signed into recognition the reservations. They said, we'll also throw in some money, goods and services, and be paid to on an annual basis called annuity payments, which was pretty typical for the other treaties that happened at the time. And the Chippewa leaders, the Anishinaabe leaders at the time, without mentioning coercion, without mentioning past disappointments, without mentioning social pressure that was happening on the landscape at that time, they said, okay, we'll agree to your proposal here, but we need to continue to feed our families. And the only way that we know how to do that is that if we retain our way of life. And US is like, okay, sure. Not having a really firm understanding of what that means. And therefore they got their compromise recognized in Article 11 of the 1854 treaty. And such of them reside in the territory hereby ceded shall have the right to hunt and fish therein until otherwise ordered by the president. So the 1854 treaty, as I mentioned, is one of 4 treaties of the Great Lakes, Western Great Lakes area that identify some sort of usufructuary rights, some sort of land use rights for those indigenous peoples. What set the 54 treaty apart was that it did in fact designate those reservations in UP, the northwestern Wisconsin, as well as the Minnesota territory, as it was not even a state yet. So even Article 11, I'm sorry, no, even the US Constitution recognizes treaties as the supreme law of the land. So this is where I kind of like to bring up a lot of the misconceptions that are still out there in the general public about what treaty rights mean for Indian peoples. And so one of the things that we hear most often is like, ugh, treaties are so old, they don't matter anymore. When in fact, this is a very heavy land exchange agreement. How would you rebuttal with doing away with the Treaty of Paris? Would this land go back to Great Britain? It's hard. It's hard as these are such binding covenants to break. Likewise, if we did away with the 54 treaty, would the land then go back to the bands and the tribes? I don't know. It's a good question to ask. So I do need to make a key point here that way back in 1905, there was a Supreme Court case called the Winans case that found that rights identified in treaty agreements are not a grant of rights to Indian people, but a grant of rights from them. So this is what's known as the reserved rights doctrine. Again, a misconception amongst the public that Indian peoples are given all these special rights. And this is where I like to use a description that my colleague Joseph, who happens to be in the audience today, he really drew this one home for me by saying, okay, so if these are special rights, you know that everybody who settled here has rights to live on the land based on that treaty. Like, I am from Bujwikwidong, I'm from the East, I'm from Northeast Wisconsin, and I have the rights to live in Duluth, Minnesota right now because of that treaty, right? That brought this land into the US, part of the US. So bear with me as I'm gonna dive into some Supreme Court cases that kind of pave the way for how treaty rights are now recognized in our neck of the woods. All right, starting back in 1942, the Thule case, this was versus the state of Washington, so out in the Pacific Northwest. This court case found that treaty rights takes precedence over state law, right? Because that treaty was signed between the indigenous sovereign groups and the US. So therefore, it takes precedence over state law. For many folks, it's really hard to understand this concept because natural resource rights were handed down to the states eventually. And therefore, when managing natural resources, a lot of the times we have to work together with our state counterparts on that level when the relationship is really set up on a federal level. About 20 years later, and a little bit down the coast in the state of Oregon, the Bologna decision found that the state is limited in its power to regulate Indian fisheries. This was a big one because if you're able to harvest your own fish, you should be able to manage your own fisheries. This is the case that kind of made me gainfully employed a little bit. Then a case in 1983, the Curator versus Wisconsin. This is known as the Voigt decision. This one came a little bit closer to home. And the Voigt decision recognized usufructuary rights in the upper Midwest. So I realized that I haven't even kind of distilled usufructuary, what that term means. It's a legal term. It means utilizing something that belongs to someone else. It's commonly used in things like the language regarding mining, because mining companies often don't own the land that they're extracting from. So that's what a usufructuary right means. So this Voigt decision was pretty big here in the upper Midwest. And specifically following that Voigt decision and around that time, for those of you who are history buffs, you know what was happening in the 70s and 80s. There was a big AIM movement, the American Indian movement. People were getting back into their traditional ways of living, their traditional ways, their practices, their culture. And some of the local folks weren't down with that. So there was lots of opposition taking the form of protests, particularly in northern Wisconsin, that got a lot of press coverage. And there definitely needed to be more legal determination so people weren't going to get hurt. In terms of our own story, in 1985, the Grand Portage Band got wind of what was going on in Wisconsin, and they filed suit with the U.S. District Court of Appeals, where the other two bands holding usufructuary rights via the 54 Treaty also joined that suit. Now, 3 years into it, the state of Minnesota steps in and they said, hey, we understand that it's going to be a lengthy process and it's going to be timely and costly. We will let you practice your treaty rights if you agree to a few simple things. And so in 1988, there was an agreement, again, pushed forward from the state that said, hey, if you abide by these things, go ahead, practice your treaty rights. First off, you'll need to develop a conservation code, right? Some rules and regulations to abide by. Some folks don't really understand that enrollees don't get to just run around and take whatever they want. They are held to rules and regulations. And that's what organizations like 1854, as well as our sister organization, Glyphwick, and some of the others in the Pacific Northwest, that's what they do. They manage the resources as well as implement and protect, make sure that there's no wanton waste and things like that. Secondly, there would be no commercial harvest. This is a different concept than some of the subsistence harvest that happens out in the Pacific Northwest. I know that especially in Alaska, Alaskan tribes have offices of subsistence harvest, and they're more of like a commercial-based approach in their community giving. It's not the same here in the upper Midwest. The 88 agreement also recognized that there would be no treaty season outside of state season. It also said there would be cross-deputization, that 1854 Treaty Authority conservation officers would be able to charge 54 ceded territory code against their band members, as well as state code against non-band members, as well as state conservation officers being able to oversee both parties as well. And also finally, it said there has to be an establishment of a judicial system. So whenever there's a violation of that conservation code, how do things happen? How are things set right? So the organization that was established to implement this agreement was called the Tri-Band Authority. In 1989, the Fond du Lac Band withdrew within the agreement, which they could, it was recognized, and which called for a name change. Can't be a tri-band with two bands, so it became the 1854 Authority. And today, in 2021, I think it is, yes it is, the 1854 Treaty Authority continues to implement that agreement. We do this by way of 14 full-time employees and a handful of seasonals, and we do it through coordinating the work through 4 different divisions: our administrative division, resource management division, which houses our biologists, education and outreach, and conservation enforcement division. So in the context of where we kind of stand today, we are one of 5 public law 638 contractors within the US. Through the BIA, we're part of a program called the Rights Protection Implementation. So intertribal natural resource management in the Western Great Lakes is implemented by the 1854 Treaty Authority, the Great Lakes Indian Fisheries and Wildlife Commission, our sister organization in Odena, Wisconsin, as well as the Chippewa-Ottawa Resource Authority over in Michigan. They do most of their stuff on the Great Lakes. Now, in the Pacific Northwest, 2 organizations, Critfic and Nifwick, they work with huge land bases as well as with a lot of different tribes. It was really exciting over the last few months. I got to participate in developing of a document with some representatives from each of these commissions that we got to work together to produce a document, like a reminder to Congress and to the new administration in DC about trust responsibility and what that means, highlighting how we've been able to use some of the funding in the past and how we've tackled really awesome successes with them. And this is really exciting that it's actually going to be sent to DC and reviewed. I learned a lot, certainly, by doing that. So a little bit story filling in the cracks here, following those court cases. In 1994, the Mille Lacs banned. The rights to hunt, fish, and gather were upheld in U.S. District Court. That's pertaining only to the 1837 ceded territory. Then in 96, Fond du Lac ban, their rights were validated in the 54, which was essentially phase one of their, of how they got their rights recognized. I think the second phase just went through in the matter of the last 2 years. And then finally in 1999, this is the biggest case we have to draw on for case law today pertaining to treaty rights. The Mille Lacs case rights were upheld in the Supreme Court, finding that, quote, treaty rights and tribal sovereignty are unaffected by state law and regulations, and that treaties made by the tribes under the US Constitution remain in effect today and are, quoting the Constitution, the supreme law of the land. And so from a legal perspective, this court case kind of closed the book on any treaty rights issues in our neck of the woods. Whereas if there were going to be any changes for any of the bands recognized in the treaties in the Western Great Lakes, they could call in this court case for their appeal. Another pretty cool thing happened in 2005. Previously, the 1854 Conservation Authority, the officers within our organization, they got their authority recognized through the Minnesota DNR. But in 2005, Minnesota does this cool thing called joint powers agreements. And our officers became recognized as equivalent to any other law enforcement agent in the state. So Border Patrol, or not mall cops, that's the one I always joke about. But being post-certified, peace officer standard trained, means that they are held to the same standards of the rest of these other enforcement officials, as well as they're required to put in X amount of training time annually and testing. I do want to remind folks that we're not a special interest group. Some people that live in areas where there's not a lot of Native influence in their communities or outside their communities, they hear the word tribal and they think, oh yeah, like honor the earth. When in fact, 1854, we actually get our authority and jurisdiction through the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, which both of our bands are members of. And we're therefore, we're a governmental entity and therefore have judicial and regulatory authority over qualified members and exercising off-reservation harvest. So essentially, our goal, our role is to support our membership to pursue their subsistence harvest activities. And we do this through a variety of means, a variety of ways. Anybody who is enrolled has to bring a form of ID to us, and we're able to turn around and provide them with an 1854 identification card. Right there you see the Smoky Moose ID card. That 1854 ID card goes to serve as a small game hunting license, fishing license, wild racing permit, even entry into the boundary waters. That's the ticket. Our board of directors is comprised of both tribal councils, and they get together about every 2 months or so, and they pass policies, advise us on some of our programming routes and things like that. They also pass seasons and bag limits every year. Last Saturday, or was it 2 Saturdays ago, our fishing opener happened, and that was because back in March, our board approved that our membership, our Boys Fort and Grand Portage membership would be able to participate in an 1854 fishing season, and it would open on such day. They also, with their help, 1854 Treaty Authority also maintains a conservation code. And that's where it's important that we maintain that thing and update it frequently, about every 5 or 6 years or so, because there's different changes that happen. Like, for instance, paper birch, like white birch, is really hot and heavy right now in terms of folks liking the way it looks. So you'll find it in like craft stores and like home decor, and actually it is regulated to harvest that stuff. So based on whoever you answer to, you should kind of know about that stuff. So we need to protect those species that are out there. Also protecting our own people, like there's technology changes too. Another thing that changed recently was like folks weren't able to just wear blaze orange. Now they can wear blaze pink. I know all of you went directly to your local stores and bought out all the blaze pink to wear in hunting season. Let me see. What else do we do? I see Janana saying, yes, Marnie's come and done a bunch of educational programming with our kids on res, as well as off. I just got back from the Boys Fort Urban Office this afternoon, working with them and just doing some basic outreach, providing IDs, talking about services we provide. We also want to make sure that our constituency is going to be safe, right? With so much natural space, if hunting and fishing doesn't take place out in places that are very highly populated, and if something bad can happen, you can't access help real fast. We also require that, equivalent to the state regulations, that anybody born after December 31st, 79 must go through a firearm safety training and carry a firearm safety certification on their person while hunting firearms or archery. So that's something I work with our conservation officers with, putting on these firearm safety trainings and making sure that, these are dangerous things that are happening. We want to make sure that folks are going to be safe when they're out doing it. Hypothermia is a huge issue, not only in the winter time. Fishing opener, falling out into the water. I mean, it can take as many as 30 seconds to drown in some cases, right? And hypothermia can totally lead to that. So we do a lot of reminding folks about how to be safe while they're out harvesting. So I kind of want to run through some of the organizational goals that our 4 different divisions function over, and kind of give examples of how that stuff takes place. So goal 1, like I mentioned before, our purpose is to support our member activities. Really, that's what Sunny, my boss, our executive director, likes to call it. It's our bread and butter. And so what does it mean if we want to set up a deer hunt, right? Well, we would have to set up a permitting system. We'd have to set up registration stations. We would have to communicate that information out to our constituency through however they have, whatever's best for them, So in my neck of the woods, that means like, okay, how do we get the word out? Am I gonna go knock on doors? I know, maybe I'm probably gonna use the radio stations and put it in our newsletter, got our website up and running. Due to the fact that people are so spread out, Facebook has been huge, man. If you want to get the word out, it's true. Got to go that route. Goal 2. So there's a lot of interest and effort to diminish rights based on some of those misconceptions, as well as population. We're growing as a nation and people want space, right? And so there's a lot of effort and interest to diminish these rights. So our staff will attend lots of meetings, we'll do a ton of letter writing. We will try to make sure that access isn't going to be limited or restricted. So like any land that comes out of federal trust, any public land that turns private means it's cut off from treaty rights access. This is my favorite goal because I was trained as a biologist, as an ecologist, and my first job was serving as a Fish and Wildlife Technician for 54 about 12 years ago. So I do love to talk about their awesome programs and projects. Goal 3 is well, what good is a right if there are no resources, or if those resources are of such poor quality that it might impact human health? So that's why our biologists do what they do in terms of monitoring and sometimes restoration. To touch on a few of the programs, probably the most culturally significant species that our Grand Portage Band recognizes is moose. And so 1854 is part of the annual Minnesota Moose Survey that takes place every January. The upper left here on your screen is a picture of Morgan, our wildlife biologist, getting up in the helicopter with the state, Fond du Lac. I think there's reps from Fish and Wildlife as well that get up there and track the moose. She just finished a really fabulous, what is it called, story map that was posted both on our website as well as our Facebook page. And it kind of describes how the moose survey is put together, the aerial moose survey is put together every year. And it kind of distills down the methods that they go about to estimate the averages or estimate the population of the moose every year. I'd encourage you guys to check it out if you can. Culturally significant species, probably most important to Boyce Fort, is monoman, is wild rice. And although Nut Lake is a hotbed and it's, you know, on res basically adjacent, we do have 10% of all waters existing in the 1854 ceded territory. 10% of those waters are specifically wild rice waters. And wild rice is pretty specific to like what type of habitat it likes. It needs shallow, slow moving water with really mucky bottoms. And so we keep tabs on whether rice exists in some of these waterways. We have an ongoing historical list that we assess pieces of every year. Like, we haven't been to that lake. We should go figure out if there's any rice on it. And we also, we monitor 10 rice beds throughout the ceded territory that are, how should I say this? We monitor their growth throughout the season as monoman is an annual plant, and we track its growth, and we make that information available to the public as a means to encourage folks to get out to harvest if they can. We know that people aren't living by the seasons anymore. You know, many of us have jobs which keep us tied to a clock and a calendar, and might not have a chance to get out and drive 3 hours to our favorite ricing honey hole. So therefore, every fall, stay tuned and check our website, as Darren's program does a really great job of sharing how the rice is coming along on each of the wild rice lakes in our neck of the woods. We have environmental biologists that keep tabs on the things we can't necessarily see, right? So air and water quality, you know, weighing in on a lot of the environmental impact statements for some of the industrial work that goes on throughout the ceded territory, with representatives from the band as well as without. We want to make sure that we don't ever overstep our bounds in speaking on behalf of the bands. We have invasive species staff that work really hard at monitoring the new species on the landscape. And invasive species is more or less a Western term. I know many of our colleagues and partner organizations, agencies like to call invasive species money doonts. So little spirits, right? From an indigenous value system, many people are taught, I was taught, that everything has a purpose, you know, everybody's here for a reason. And so there might be a reason why these invasive species are here, but we do want to monitor to see the impacts on some of these things. you know, is our spiny water fleet in our inland lakes screwing up the trophic levels? Are our native fish struggling to find a decent food source? Yes, we want to monitor how they're doing that. And we also want to control what we can. and they spend a lot of time at boat launches talking to people. Hey guys, clean off your boat. If you're going to go fish, you have to be a good steward and make sure that you're not transferring these from one lake to another. Oh, my favorite stories. Lake sturgeon. The restoration of lake sturgeon on the St. Louis River. A bunch of different organizations about 25 years ago stocked lake sturgeon as they had been extirpated from that system about 100 years ago. And right now, over the last 2, 3, 4 years, we've finally started to see natural reproduction finally taking place. And it is a really long-term scale restoration project, but to be able to see the fruits of their labor, it's so exciting. They just actually finished their surveys for the tiny little guys. They go out at night and they trap them in a little net and they sort out through all the bugs and stuff, and they find these itty bitty tiny baby sturgeon. Again, like they mentioned, Allyse and Becca mentioned earlier on in the intro, this was a topic of one of our programs earlier on this year. We do have a recording of that sturgeon presentation if you guys want to check it out on our YouTube channel. And also, how do we know how to manage? How do we decide to manage things with an unknown future, right? Like climate change is real and it's affecting a lot of things tenfold. So how do we do it? We know that we have to adapt. Everybody has to adapt. Life will find a way. Lastly, the goal, pertaining to my division's work, to preserve culture. And cultural preservation, what does that mean? It means that we have knowledgeable harvesters. Maybe not harvesters, but we have a knowledgeable constituency based on environmental awareness, you know? So that's what I do, taking kids out, giving them an experience of fishing if they've never done it before, getting close and personal with some of the furs of the fur bearers that live in our backyards, because not many of us have really seen a fisher out on a jaunt. They're pretty cryptic little creatures, so being able to feel their fur and learn a little bit about how they live and what they feed on and things like that is really important. So I work with tribal youth and families on that stuff, as well as doing outreach like this with the general public on what are treaty rights, what does it mean? We have a really great website, actually needs a little bit of updating, but if you're interested, there's a lot of information on there. And if you guys are history buffs, I'd recommend that you check out this publication, The Right to Hunt and Fish Therein. It actually tells our story, kind of like I did today, but it's a little more thorough in going through some of that stuff. I'd like to say miigwech for now, because I'm sure that some of you will have some questions, perhaps pertaining to water, because that's the topic of the event here. But miigwech for your time. Thank you for taking the time to learn and to share and to be a steward. I encourage you all to be a good ancestor. And with that, I am going to work with Becca and Allyse to see where we are with like maybe moderating some questions and stuff.
Sure, yeah, thank you again, Marne, so much for sharing just your knowledge, your expertise, all of that kind of stuff. It's always good to learn different viewpoints and stories that, you know, were either not purposely taught to us or you know, just weren't covered. So it's always incredible to uncover or to share those stories, you know, and to learn more about that kind of stuff. So again, thank you so much for being here tonight. So in terms of questions, Becca, did I miss? I don't think we had any outright throughout it. unless I missed one. But if someone does have a question, you know, please feel free to type it. Oh wait, we do have one. So the question is, and Marne, feel free to talk about it. What about stopping line 3?
That's a great question. And thank you, Tracy, for throwing that out. Quite honestly, I don't know a whole lot of the situation, but what I do know, I will share with you. I am most educated in like Section 103 historical preservation policy and how the feds have to recognize projects that either are funded by federal dollars or are taking place on federal lands. And so line 3 would definitely apply to this, to that. They'd have to be held accountable for that. And so any federal project that meets those 2 requirements, they are required to consult, to adhere to a consultation policy to work with bands and tribes that these projects might be impacting. And this is where I don't necessarily know all the info pertaining to line 3, but I definitely know how some of that consultation is implemented for at least for the 2 bands that we work for, and how that information is brought forth. The tribal historic preservation officers are key spokespeople sometimes, as well as environmental staff too. So I need to do my due diligence in learning a little bit more about the history, and as well as what line 3 means and how it's affected some of the communities.
Sure. Actually, Marne, would you care to, Neil just had a follow-up question for what is line 3, just for those who might not be from the local area. I know I will do a quick shout out that my mother is watching. So hi, Mom, thanks for joining. But anyways, if Marne, if you could just quickly explain what line 3, from your perspective.
This is where I'm gonna have to pull the audience, because I mean, I know it's oil related, and I know that's it's about piping oil, and we all drive cars. We're kind of dependent on it as a large society right now. So anybody else want to take a stab at it? You're welcome to. Yeah, a replacement pipeline.
Yeah, it's a replacement oil pipeline, and it's not in my work area, so I'm not detailed familiar with it, but it crosses the southern part of, actually, no. I don't believe it crosses St. Louis County. I think it just crosses Carleton County, the Fond du Lac reservation, and I think Itasca County. I'm not sure the full extent, but in my kind of close area, it's a replacement pipeline, as Marne said. So yes, and it's a controversial endeavor. Oh, and thank you, Andrew. It does cross Southwest St. Louis County. So I am corrected. I cover north of Cotton.
St. Louis County is a very large county. Again, for those of you who might not live in this county, it's larger than, like, because I'm not from here either, but I remember doing a comparison, and St. Louis County is bigger than Rhode Island for sure. I don't know. Anyway, it's huge. So it's just a county. But okay, getting back to some questions. What are your thoughts on the contrast between mentalities and regulation of wildlife between settlers and indigenous peoples in the lower 48 versus Alaska? Yeah. So this is a pop quiz.
Right, and I don't know if I should necessarily, if I'm the right one to answer that. Again,
Okay.
so that's a tough thing about my job, because I can be an advocate for my bands, but I am not a community member. I am not an enrollee. And I like people, and I love to work with people, and I like to educate people, and I'll stand and support stuff. But when it comes down to some of these issues, the public has to know and understand what sovereignty means, and self-rule and how it's implemented. But I'll take a stab. All right, what are your thoughts on contrast between mentalities and regulation of wildlife between settlers and indigenous people in the lower 48 versus Alaska? Very different, right? I work with all of our conservation officers here at 1854 have worked in Alaska. They kind of cut their teeth out there, and it's a different way of life. I don't know how else to explain it. Settlers versus indigenous peoples. You also have to remember, this is a kind of, working with the general public, a lot of folks don't understand that, like, as a political designation of a sovereign people, you have views and cultural values and norms and understandings and educational levels and socioeconomic levels that are as broad of a spectrum as you do nationwide in some of these tribes and bands. So, you know, a lot of the time, our charge is like, hey, we want to preserve cultural stuff by, you know, getting out to hunt and learning how to Reiss. Some folks don't dig it, you know, they're like, nah, I'd rather go shopping. and that's okay. The cool thing is that we're able to interpret our own heritage. It's ours, we own it. If anybody else wants to ring in on that, like, I know that we do have some Voice for It folks on here, so if anybody wants to pipe in. Oh
yeah. I guess so. Where are we?
Can I answer Neil's question?
Yes.
All right, so this is my entertainment for the week. I love working with Forest Service. And especially their liaison too. He's a big supporter of our work and working together to get the bands out and harvest. And whenever I need something, like for instance, I reached out to them, Superior National Forests, a couple weeks ago, and I said, hey guys, you have these BWCA trip guides, trip planning guides. Can we get a box of them in our office? Because, you know, it's summer season, people are, you know, a little more breaking out of their shell. Many of us have been vaccinated and whatever, but I don't know if people are really willing to like dive into what some of their experiences might be if they do hit up the BWCA. So I'd like to have that resource on hand just for outreach, because we're starting to do more powwows and stuff. And they're like, no problem, we'll mail it to you. And so I get back to the office and I open this box and I'm all excited. And they sent me a box of permits. And I was like, sorry guys, this ain't gonna help me. Because again, like our membership are able to access BWCA without a permit. So with their 1854 card that acts in place of a permit for them. I see, Neil, you were asking like, if you're going to get back to Northern Minnesota, how does one obtain a BWCA canoe permit? Well, clearly you'd have to come to my office and bribe me for one of these permits. Just kidding. I don't know. I've never had to apply for a permit. That's a really good question. Me, myself, if I've ever gone to the BWCA, it's always been day trips where I know you could fill out a form right on site, or I've been there for work. And I know that we have an MOU with the Forest Service to be able to enter for management and monitoring purposes. So I would say reach out to your local USDA. I mean, I can find out for you if you want to drop me a line. That's a good idea. I should probably put my email address. you guys have any further questions.
Yeah, that would actually be a good resource if you wouldn't mind. We have another question. If that's God, I can't talk. What possible negative effects are there now that water is, or now that water is now a commodity on Wall Street?
This is a flashback to my schooling days, literally. It was like, how do we estimate, clean air in the future?
Right.
Clearly the upper echelon folks are gonna have more access, which is unfortunate that it's something that's throughout our history on Earth. It's scary to me to think that in Colorado that water is already owned by somebody else when it falls from the sky. That's how their legal stuff is interpreting water. People can't keep rain barrels, they can't water their gardens with rainwater. And it's kind of a foreign concept for us here up in northeastern Minnesota because of our access to water. But I would just encourage everybody to find out as much as they can about issues like these, because you can speak with your money and you can speak with your vote.
I'll just add on to that, as someone who works directly with water and does water quality monitoring and outreach, there's a lot to water that there's just so much. I don't know a lot about Line 3 and water trading. So even on me, and I'm sure other natural resource professionals, we need to learn more too, of how it all affects and interrelates. Which is why I'm so grateful that Marne came through, because we don't necessarily know all the programs that are happening in our area and the details. Oh, someone put in the link for BWCA permits.
Good, Michael. Thanks for sharing that. That's why it's nice to have everybody in person, because you're able to connect right there. And we connect here too through chat. It's nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and I saw another question. Can you describe how 1854 enrollees can stay at U.S. Forest Service campgrounds? Yeah.
Sure thing. Actually, I'm just working on a newsletter. Hang on one second. Newsletter that hopefully should be hitting the mail tomorrow or very soon. Just a spring reminder, summer reminders, and how our folks can access some of these spaces. So Grand Portage and Bois Forte members can camp in open Superior National Forest campgrounds exempt of camping fees. They are first come, first serve. In addition, you can call to reserve campsites. There is a reservation fee of $8, but there is no fee for calling. If you reserve the site online, you will have to pay that $8. We've been on them, and they're trying to change the system and the process for how that works. And stay tuned for updates on that. Information updates for individual Forest Service campgrounds can be found. It's a big long link name, but last year I know that the campgrounds that were open to their band members free of charge were closed, definitely for COVID. So it looks like 2021 they're all open, which is awesome.
All right, I think we should do the prize wheel soon. But I do see one, maybe we'll do this question, do the prize wheel, and then if there's any other questions, they can put them in the chat. And but just I know other people might have things to get to this evening too. So are the tribes concerned about mercury in fish?
Yes, actually that was an item on our last Board of Directors meeting. Minnesota Department of Health does testing and does have a lot of good data on what the mercury levels in some of our native fish here in our inland lakes and the big pond too. And they make that information available to the public. We asked if it's changed, if knowing that there's mercury in fish, does it change the eating habits of some of our families, our tribal families? And it's a very small percentage that actually are out eating fish at least once or twice a week. I know for myself, if I catch one, yeah, I'll eat it. But I don't necessarily get to go out and fish so very often anymore. We do have the capacity and the resources here at 1854 to design a mercury awareness outlet, some more information for the public as well as our bands, our membership, informing them of the detriments of consuming fish, mercury, especially like pregnant women or women of childbearing years and things like that. So yeah, that's where our environmental, a lot of these questions you guys said are spot on for a lot of the programs that our environmental biologists oversee. And I'm sorry that they couldn't be here tonight to answer some of these more effectively, but you know what? You can contact them. Their contact info is on our website. Give Darren or Tyler a call.
Great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen then of the prize wheel that I have. So just a moment. Okay, so what we have available is a Discovery Year Pass, and correct me if I'm wrong, Allyse, to the Minnesota Discovery Center. And that's a family pass.
Correct, that's a family pass with like unlimited trolley, unlimited visits for a whole year. I think it's up to 5, no, well, be like your whole family, yeah, essentially your whole family.
Sure. Okay. And then also 2 of those $25 gift certificates to the Rustic Pig, which is delicious food, and a package of wild rice that's sold in the gift shop. And then also I'm going to send out some swag from our Soil and Water Conservation District. So that'll be 5. So first we'll start off with one of the $25 certificates. Here we go. All right, so that is for Kristen D, and we will have your email or registration to contact you if there's any problem with that in the chat. Okay.
Okay.
Did I hear a question? No?
Oh, I'm not muted.
Okay. All right, next we will do the wild rice. All right, we have James and Larissa who, hi James and Larissa, I used to work with at Stand Underground Mine State Park. Okay, next we'll do another $25 gift certificate. And there we have Mary L. Congratulations. Okay, and then we'll do one for my SWCD stickers and related. There will be some aquatic invasive species related material for that, which there will be a future presentation speaker series on. All right, Margaret. All right, and then last we'll do the big one, the year discovery pass.
You guys can you spin it again? Because I'm a board member for the MDC, so I already have that.
Sure, I saw that. Okay, I will remove that, Julie.
Not that I wouldn't take it, but I'd be greedy.
All right, we'll do it again. One more chance. Renee. All right, so that's everything. I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see your faces. And then I didn't see if there were any more questions come in, so.
I don't think so. We should be good. But yeah, Marnie did put her contact info up in chat, her email. Otherwise, you can always search 1854 Treaty Authority to get more info. Should you have any further questions, or feel free to bug Becca or myself, any of that kind of stuff. So again, thank you all for participating. I hope you learned something. And if you enjoyed this, then we have 3 more coming throughout the summer. And if you are local, you can also maybe come see the exhibit. It'd be pretty cool if you did. Becca, did you have anything to add, or Marnie?
I'll mention quick too, because we were talking related to line 3. There is going to be a play on June 10th by Sharon Day. And it does relate to pipelines, not specifically to line 3, but it is a way to kind of talk about it after the play. There'll be Minnesota Humanities Center will be around if people want to talk and kind of explore those issues a bit more. So yeah, if you are local or able to visit, please do. Yeah, and then just check out that We Are Water Iron Range website for additional events and email questions if you have any. So thank you, Marnie, so much for coming. Thank you for putting on the great resources that you have before too, which I encourage everyone to check out. And if you have any last words, feel free to do so.
Listen to Marnie though. Go buy Wild Rice from the Boys Fort Band. I'm gonna see if I can find it really quickly to put it in chat. Otherwise, I got it. 1 second, everyone. Oh.
It's the best rice. It's world renowned. Chefs will seek it out worldwide, and it is the only rice you can puff like popcorn, which is a really delicious one.
Ma, you were upset that you didn't win the Wild Rice. Go on that link. She loves Wild Rice, and so go on that link and buy some. Okay. Anyways, again, thank you, everyone. I'll end the session now, if that's good for everyone. Perfect. So, all right. Good night, everyone.